Now before I show you how to format your paragraphs, like into columns, doing some numbering, bullets, line spacing, or paragraph indents, we need to know how Microsoft views a paragraph, or what is a paragraph according to Microsoft. To do that, let's come down here to slide 4. Now in my English class I was taught that 3 or 4 sentences make up a paragraph. Not according to Microsoft, a paragraph is any time that you hit the Enter key on the keyboard. For example, this looks like a paragraph, the one up at the top right. If I come in and click after the word Burke and hit Enter, I just created 2 separate paragraphs, because when I hit Enter it adds what's known as a hard return, or it'll have a paragraph code, but we can't view the codes, not PowerPoint. We could in Microsoft Word if you want to watch my Word 2010 training videos on paragraphs, but we can't see them here because on the Home tab in the paragraph group in Microsoft Word there would be a Show Hide Codes button. It's not available in PowerPoint, so we just have to trust that, hey, when we hit Enter, there's a code there that says this here, or that text, is a separate paragraph than the text down below because we have a code breaking the 2 paragraphs, okay? Or we hit the Enter key on the keyboard. So without turning on the Show Hide Codes because it's not available in PowerPoint, there are a couple ways you can tell whether this is a paragraph up above separate from the paragraph down below. One way is you can go ahead and triple click really fast, because when you triple click it'll select the entire paragraph. For example, come down here, triple click, selects all the lines in that paragraph separate and not going above the paragraph marker here where we hit the Enter key on the keyboard to select Burke or the text down below, okay? Another way to find out is that when you start applying formatting to these paragraphs, know that you don't have to select the paragraph to go ahead and apply it. Just click anywhere within the paragraph because again we got the codes that are breaking it from the text up above when we hit the Enter key and the text down below. Click anywhere within the paragraph, and if we want to align this paragraph, like the default's left align, let's come up here. On the Home tab in the paragraph group, there's the alignment buttons, left, center, right, and justify. Okay, let's go ahead and do center. Notice it just centers within the text box this paragraph. Doesn't center the Burke, doesn't center the text down below, because we have hard returns or paragraph codes separating this paragraph from the one up above and the one down below. Okay, if you want to go ahead and apply the alignment to all the paragraphs, then you can go ahead and hit undo and click and drag and select all of them and then hit center align. I mean, that works, okay? Let's go ahead and hit undo a couple of times. So we're back to where we started. Now that you know what Microsoft considers a paragraph, we can go ahead and continue on with formatting our paragraphs. So you actually know what's going on now. When I go ahead and just click inside a paragraph to apply some of the formats, how it applies to the entire paragraph, unless I want to select all paragraphs, okay? By the way, this may not be obvious to you, but when I hit the Enter key on the keyboard and you're looking at that, if you open up this presentation for the first time and you're like, oh, that's a separate paragraph, well, that may not be true. Let me go ahead and hit undo. What if I held down the space bar and spaced this way out, okay? It looks like 2 separate paragraphs, doesn't it? But if I come in here and I triple click really fast, you see that? I didn't hit the Enter key at the end of Burke, I just kept hitting the space bar, so if I do any formatting, like alignments, it'll go ahead and affect Burke up above because we don't have a paragraph or a hard return separating that from the rest of the text down below, okay? Wanted to make sure I made that a little bit more clear here. Let's hit undo. Other things we can do, go ahead and click anywhere within the text box, and up here on the Home tab in the paragraph group, we can go ahead and convert our text within the text box to 2 or more columns by clicking on the column drop down arrow. Let's do 2. That looks pretty good, except I don't like the spacing or the gap between that column and that one. It's too tight. So if I want to go ahead and have some more space between the 2 columns, come back up here, click on the drop down arrow. For the columns, go to more columns, and down where it says spacing, let's go ahead and change that to 1/4 of an inch, 0.25, click OK, and that looks better. A little bit bigger of a gap between the 2 columns. Okay, let's go ahead and learn about line spacing. By default, the spacing between the lines is single, so you don't have much space between that line and this one. I mean, just enough so it's readable, and not much of a gap where it's too tight or close together, so it makes it a little bit annoying to read it. But what you can do is click anywhere within the paragraph if you just want to change the spacing for that paragraph. Come back up here to the paragraph group, hover over the line spacing, click on the drop down arrow, and well, let's do 3 for line spacing. You can see that I haven't clicked on it, but down below in the slide it gives you a preview. I mean, that's a huge amount of spacing in between each line. We can do 1.5, that's not bad. Select it, and that looks okay. Or if you want to get more precise, you can go ahead and click on the line spacing drop down arrow again and go to the options. and then come down here where it says line spacing 1.5, which by the way you can do double or exactly. Then come over here and make it exactly, well, we can click on the up arrow or just come over here and do, let's say, 36 point, click OK. Actually, it didn't change at all. 36 looks like it's about 1.5. That was a good demonstration. So you don't trust me, huh? Well, let's try it again. Click on the drop down arrow, line spacing, and let's go to, how about 24? Click OK. There's not much spacing between the lines, as you can see in the second paragraph. Okay, let's go ahead and undo all this. Let's go back to single spacing, okay, for that paragraph. Let's go ahead and convert this back to one column. And what I want to show you next is how you can go ahead and do some paragraph indentation. In other words, to do this, you want to have your rulers on, the horizontal ruler and the vertical ruler. And if you don't have them turned on, then come up here on the View tab, go to the Show Group and check Ruler. Let me check it again so it brings it up. Because up here in the horizontal ruler, you have 3 paragraph markers. The triangle pointing down, that's known as the first line indent. It indents the first line of the paragraph if I click and drag it over. Then below that you have a triangle pointing up. That's the hanging indent. It indents all but the first line of the paragraph. And then down below that, you have the little rectangle. That indents the whole paragraph. So let's go ahead and go over this. So the first line, if I want to indent that, go ahead and click and drag that over. And notice that my cursor was flashing in that paragraph, so it only affects that paragraph. So the first line is indented as far as I drag this over. Okay, let me go ahead and drag it back to the edge here. And then below that, you have what's known as the hanging indent marker, that if you click on that triangle pointing up, I mean, it's really tiny, I don't know if you can see it. Go ahead and click and drag that over. It indents all but the first line of the paragraph. I mean, that looks kind of cool. Let me go ahead and hit undo, or you can drag it back. And then below that, if you want to indent the entire paragraph, then go ahead and click and drag that left indent, the little rectangle, drag it over, and indents the entire paragraph. Okay, let me go ahead and undo that, go back to where we started. Now, we have 2 separate paragraphs, and if I want to go ahead and turn these paragraphs into bulleted points, then what I need to do is come back up here, go to the Home tab, which is one way we can do this. And then for this paragraph to be a bulleted point, just go ahead and click anywhere within it. Come up here on the Home tab again to the paragraph group and click on Bullets. And it turns it into a bulleted point. Of course, it used the default theme bullet, which is a light blue square. That's okay. I can hit undo if I want to apply it to both paragraphs. Select both. And then go ahead and click on Bullets. And then click off. And notice this one down below. If you look up with the paragraph markers here and click up here in the first paragraph, notice how it shifts over. If I want this second paragraph to look like this one, then I can either, come up here and see where it's at, and then come down here and, click and drag and move it over. That works. So if I click and drag the bottom rectangle, so it indents the whole paragraph, and click and drag that over one, that looks good. And then if I don't want bulleted points or talking points, maybe more of a list of priority, like, this would be number 1, that would be number 2, then you can go ahead and click and drag and select it. Come back up here to the paragraph group and go to numbering. Click on that. It goes 1, 2. Alright. You have other options. You don't have to go with the basics there. You can go ahead and select it and click on their corresponding drop-down arrows for bullets. You get other options there. And you can come down here and click on bullets and numbering and get even more options than just the basics. You can actually come down here and choose a picture. Click on the picture. You get, well, a bunch of default pictures and some that you can actually import from your computer by clicking on Import, browsing your computer, selecting the picture and clicking Add. And that's how I added these here. So I can go ahead and select those. Now, when I use those as bulleted points, I mean, it's going to be kind of tiny, so we may not be able to see it. But in any case, I'll go ahead and select it, click OK, and there you go. You can barely see it. Let me click off. In any case, you get more options there. Let me click and drag and select those. For the numbering, click on the drop-down arrow. You can, again, it's very faded. You can do ABCs, or you can, again, bring up the bullets numbering, and it'll take us to the number tab, and we can choose it here. Or we can go ahead and do something a little bit more custom when we select a number like 1, 2, 3 and say, instead of starting at 1, we can start at 2. I mean, you get all these different options to choose from and click OK, so we have 2 and 3. Although that wouldn't make sense unless, of course, on the previous slide we had number 1 and then we went over or spilled over into the next slide and had 2 and 3. We continued on. Let me show you a couple more things, then we'll call it. Let's go to slide 3 where we already have some text bulleted here. If you go ahead and you click in the second bullet just after it but before the text and hit the Tab key, it'll actually indent that and create a hierarchical structure saying that, well, this bulleted point's the main point and this is the supporting point to the main point there. So just hit the tab key and it'll go ahead and indent that. If you want to go back out, then you can hold down the shift key and hit the tab key and it promotes it to its original level. You can also either come up here on the Home tab, go to the paragraph group, and use the Increase button. When you click on it, it indents it, or you can right-click and bring up the miniature formatting toolbar, and there are the buttons there to increase or decrease and go back out. And then finally, again, keep in mind that we've got our paragraph markers up above. We have the first line indent, and then the next one, the triangle pointing up, is the hanging indent, and then the entire left indent for the paragraph. If you don't like the spacing in between the bulleted point and the text, then go ahead and come up here and make some changes. You can click on the hanging indent, the triangle pointing up, and click and drag that to create more space between the bulleted point and the rest of the text, if you want to do it that way. Let's go ahead and hit undo, or you can click and drag the bottom rectangle, drag that over, and it moves it over further from the border of the text box, and then from there you can go ahead and click and drag that hanging indent paragraph marker, the triangle pointing up. I mean, they're so tiny if you can see them. Go ahead and click on it, drag it over, so I got some spacing from the left border of the text box by moving it over the left indent rectangle there, and then after I moved it over, then I just moved the hanging indent over so I can get more space between the bulleted point and the text. And of course you can click and drag that back, and click and drag it back, or just hit the undo button a couple of times.